we screen a resume through three main categories. First of all, skills. You just need to know that the person can do the functions that you need. Can you measure? So not only can you do it, but how have you gone above and beyond? And can you actually measure success so you know how? The last, and this is the squishy part, and this is what AI is never really going to be able to do. What's your story? Who are you?
Welcome back to another episode of the Organized Chaos Podcast. My guest today is Annemarie Penny, the founder of Greenmore, a Forbes-listed recruiting and advisory firm that specializes in helping startups and middle-market companies build exceptional teams. She's not your typical recruiter. She's a founder and investor herself, which gives her a unique perspective on the challenges growing companies face. Annemarie has helped many companies secure funding, scale up, and successfully exit through IPOs and acquisitions. Her firm takes a boutique-style approach to recruiting, focusing on those particularly challenging roles that can make or break a company's growth trajectory. What makes her perspective especially valuable is her track record of placing professionals through C-suite positions across all functions, with a particular talent for filling those hard-to-fill positions that keep founders up at night. Her work has earned her numerous accolades, including recognition from the Los Angeles Business Journal for Lifetime Achievement and Best Recruiting Partner. She's been featured in major media outlets, including the LA Times, MSNBC, CNBC, and Bloomberg. Today, I'm going to tap into Annemarie's wealth of knowledge about building high-performing teams in high-growth environments, and she'll share her insights on navigating the evolving landscape of recruitment in our AI-driven world. Let's jump right into the conversation. Annemarie, great to have you on the show. Almost everyone I've met who is in HR has had a very unique story of how they got into the space, usually not something that was planned during their school days. So I'd love it if you could walk us really through how you really found your road into HR, specifically in recruitment with startups and mid-market, companies.
Absolutely. And yes, there's certainly educational programs for HR, but particularly on the recruiting and talent acquisition side, I don't think any little girl who grew up on 100 acres in Arkansas rolled out of bed and said, wow, when I grow up, I want to be a recruiter.
Right.
Maybe an astronaut. But yeah, I came to California when I was a teenager. I had $200 and a degree and a lot of hopes and dreams and built my life from there. So I'm very grateful as always for mentorship. So I had started out in corporate finance, figuring it's good to know how the numbers work no matter where you go in your career. And so after leaving KPMG to pursue my next role, that was the first time I'd ever worked with headhunters. And it was everything across the board. True story. I hope he's not listening, but the person who placed me drove an old black Corvette and had a mullet. And this was not the era that people wore mullets.
Right.
The person that got me great interviews didn't place me. But after I started my new job, she followed up. Now that blew my mind because I was in finance. So I saw the money go through and I said, why are you calling me? You didn't make the money. And she just giggled and she said, silly, this is about a relationship. And this is what we do. We follow up. We stay in touch. And that was so transformative as a concept of what recruiting could be and what the human resources function really should be, that I pivoted and went to work for her and was mentored quite wonderfully in the career.
No, that's great. I also got my HR start in recruiting as well. And what you just said really resonates is that a lot of it is really building relationships. And even it is the lifeblood really of, especially the type of companies that you and I work with, these startup growing companies. Recruiting is such a core critical function. And, it's not always easy to find the best talent, and having that relationship and that network that you can tap into, even as you work with different companies and so forth, becomes really so critical. Otherwise, really, it's just so difficult to get people in the door who are going to make an impact.
Now more than ever, somewhere in the false positive, which is AI and LinkedIn and tools like that can get you access to anybody in the world immediately. But here's the thing, the authenticity of who we are as people and the authenticity in relationships, that becomes the shorthand. And, I defined my success a long, long time ago that it wasn't about the money. You build enough tech startups, you see a bunch of unicorns and billionaires, and then you see that that money was never what made the satisfaction and the purpose of it all. So I decided a long time ago that my definition of success, am I a phone call away from solving any problem? Because at the end of the day, it's about people. It's not about these other tools or resources.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a good segue for us into recruiting in the startup world. You and I have talked about this before, and, we've both worked in this space for a long time. And there's always this understanding that startups have a fundamental difference in how they operate from really established companies. As a longtime recruiter yourself and headhunter, someone who's been doing this for a long time, what do you think really makes recruiting for startups fundamentally different from recruiting for really established companies?
The whole mindset and personality of what makes a startup employee or a startup leader is so different from corporate. We actually have a science tool called Founder Success, and it's based on a 14-year study specifically on something like 22,000, startup founders and leaders over the last decade or two. And we were able to show with data what we already knew in our hearts. Entrepreneurial types are just different. We're wired differently. We can't help ourselves. And so in corporate America, and there's no shame in this, it's just the personalities and the structure. You don't need everybody having an individual opinion and taking the initiative and running with it. In a large corporate environment, that's not the organized chaos. It's just the chaos and creates a lot of issues. On the other hand, both scientifically and proven just with the reality of the situation, if everybody has groupthink and keeps agreeing with each other in a startup environment, there's no innovation. There's very little traction and progress. They become one of the statistics, which are 90% of startups that fail. And one of the things that we see in startup cultures that are actually quite healthy is instead of avoiding conflict, actually being able to figure out how do we have differing opinions in a healthy way and then bust through all of that brainstorming and, God, that's a stupid idea, not being scared to throw out a stupid idea because there's a lot of stupid ideas that are now unicorns. And there's a lot of great ideas that everybody agreed with each other so much that they just ran themselves gently into the ground and you've never heard of those startups.
Yeah, no, I think that's an amazing point. I think a lot of us assume that the startup world is just focused on the companies we hear about in the news, that top 1% that have succeeded, whereas the 90+% that really failed are the ones we really learned the most from and see really how they failed and why, I kind of learned from there. But you mentioned something really interesting, sort of about the characteristics and traits that really separate a startup person from someone who's working at an established company. I typically refer to this, and sometimes I get a lot of heat for it, is the employee mentality versus the entrepreneurship mentality. Regardless of whether you're an actual FTE employee or not, but to your point, they're just wired differently, right? They think differently. They don't want to box themselves into their job description. There's a lot of opportunities they always want to tap into, which I think is amazing.
Well, we can actually measure that. And if anybody's interested after this to explore this founder success tool, for those who have extreme knowledge of self, often any of these measurement tools just make you go, oh yeah, I knew that. For a lot of people though, it can be some reveals. And especially at a founder level, it can inform how do you position people in the organization as co-founders or as employees. There's basically 4 main categories. One of them is just active. Startup personalities are not clocking out 8 hours later and then thinking about something else. Now, please, everyone in the startup world, spend time with your family, do some self-care. I am not at all a proponent of grind culture, but you know yourself. And if your brain is working over dinner and in the middle of the night, that is very much a
raising my hand.
And you don't hate it because it's fun to solve cool problems. So active, adventurous, you have whatever that fear gene is that you're going to feel it. That's the thing people don't often understand. We feel the fear. It just doesn't stop us because we are excited about the adventure of it. The unflappability, we worked a long time on what's the word for that. And we decided that, I like to call it delusional. Everybody who's a hardcore founder has this mind over, like, of course it's going to succeed. 90% of you are going to fail. No, it's going to succeed.
And now that you
Although
mention it, I think it makes a lot of sense. Now that you mention it, like that delusion, I think is real, right? Because you always have this sometimes misguided sense of, this is going to succeed. There's nothing that's going to stop us, right? And sometimes it could be just completely misplaced, not founded up, on solid grounds. I've been someone who's made that mistake before in ventures that have failed before. And when you look back, you're like, how did I even make that decision? And what was I thinking? But in the moment, I think it is pretty difficult sometimes when you try to make all the stars align and you believe so much in what you're doing, where it kind of blinds you to the reality of things and you get married to one idea, which is something that I've learned not to do.
Here's the thing. I learned this because besides all of the other things that I've done with my career, I executive produced 3 indie films. I'm not going to tell you what they are. I'm not proud of them. They're buried deep in Netflix. But going on to a movie set and you look around and you recognize the person who's excellent at directing or acting or hair and makeup or lighting, those are very different personalities. And I realized it's a miracle any movie gets made ever, because to have all of these different types of people come together, aligned toward a common goal, it's a miracle. And respect every film, no matter how bad or great it is, for the accomplishment of it. Startups are similar. And this is where we have an easy trap in the startup world that we don't even realize we do it. And we definitely do this in any recruiting or HR. We will tend to gravitate towards people that are similar to us because that's just our basic human brains. We want to survive. So we want people that are going to agree with us and support us. And in times of stress like these days, we do it even more so because of the fear. But any successful startup, any successful movie, there might be some clash, but that is what makes the art and delivers an outcome that is above itself.
No, that's a great point. And it's as if you know exactly what I'm going to be diving into. You're kind of teeing up my next questions, which I think is great, making my life easier. But
here for it.
Definitely what you're mentioning is something that I usually, classify as like some of the hiring mistakes that startup founders make early on, where they try to hire people, that look like them, who think like them, who agree with them, all that kind of stuff. Apart from that, what are really some of the most frequent hiring mistakes you see startup founders make? And what are some recommendations you have for overcoming some of these mistakes?
Well, I'm going to be talking for the next 2 hours because that's a very loaded question. But let's parse it down.
Think of the top 3 to 5, let's say.
We're going to teach a masterclass later. Everybody, it's $400. You're going to save $1,000. It's totally bargain. But getting back to the question, resumes are still the language that we speak when it comes to who do I want to interview and who do I want to hire. So we screen a resume through 3 main categories. First of all, skills. You just need to know that the person can do the functions that you need. And sometimes you fall in love with somebody and you don't even take that moment to go, wait a minute, how are you at Excel? So, bang through that. And that is a lot that AI tools can do effectively and save time when we're interviewing to get to the meat of it. Success, can you measure? So not only can you do it, but how have you gone above and beyond? And can you actually measure success so you know how? Now that could be tricky on some functions. How do you measure success of somebody who's in operations or support or product managers that I've interviewed and they say, oh, well, we never launched these things. Well, you still should be able to measure something, even if your success metric is, here's how I failed and here's what I learned. Well, that's measurable and predictable. The last, and this is the squishy part, and this is what AI is never really going to be able to do. What's your story? Who are you? If you are naturally the person that throws themselves into failure, learns quickly, iterates, repeats, that's great. That's part of who you are. That might not be great for my organization that's a little bit more analytical and planning and doesn't need the maverick who's just constantly going to drop off the cliff and come back again. But whatever that person's story and, who they really are is crucial. And then bouncing it against, well, if you're just like everybody else in the organization, well, that tells me, some things that I need to know.
No, I think these are all great points. And I think it also feeds into the second part of this that I usually talk about and think of is that when you're doing hiring, right? Hiring it's very complex when you're dealing with human beings, right? I mean, this is my personal experience, but no matter how great your interview process is and how good your vetting is and so forth, you are going to be making some bad hires at some point, right? It's kind of inevitable. It's going to happen, right? It's part of it. Now, when you do make that bad hire, there are different philosophies around how you deal with it in a startup world. There's the philosophy of, hey, hire slow, make sure you have the right person, and fire fast if they're not working out. It's common in the startup world. It's actually a philosophy that I've employed before that has worked well. But also, there's the other side of this where, hey, if someone isn't doing a good job, spend some time to develop them, to give them what they need, and give them some leeway. Although it's a startup and moving quickly, and hey, we might have a cash constraint, we might have deadlines to meet and so forth, where the decision becomes tougher, but give them that leeway and they might work out over time. And if not, then let's say sever ties. As someone who's been in the space for so long with recruitment and having worked in these kind of environments before, which model have you seen work better, and which one do you think founders should focus more on to have better chances of success in really attracting and retaining the best talent?
Somewhere in all this energy, I mean, the owner of the first firm I worked for, I remember he was a fun, snarky guy, and he would say, this job would be great if it weren't for people. This job would be easy, but unfortunately, people are involved. So the direct answer on this, in sales, I have a very strong philosophy that, delivering the best sale doesn't mean it's the best price or the best quality or any of those external factors. Have you set expectations roughly at the same level as reality? And no matter what those levels are, if expectations and reality are pretty closely correlated, then it's going to be okay. So much in hiring is this extreme complexity that we're never going to solve with any tool, that we're people in all directions. So hiring managers and founders in particular, how much knowledge of self do you have? What are your expectations? Please be honest with yourself. Yeah. I can't tell you how many founders get frustrated because they hire an employee and the employee doesn't treat the business like they own it. And I'm sitting over here like, yeah, because they're not a founder. Nobody's ever going to love you like you. And so what are you expecting out of these folks? And what are you communicating and guiding? So do I hire them, fire them? Do I train them? Do I let it go? There's boundaries and consequences and trade-offs to every decision. Mm-hmm. And you really have to look at each one individually and break it down to, were my expectations on par with reality? So what can I do as the employer? And then how much does this cost me in time, energy, and money? And then recognizing that it's going to cost me no matter what. So let me be clear on those costs and then balance out. Maybe hire an HR consultant to come in and, bite the bullet and say, I don't know what I'm doing, but maybe people like you and me do. Yeah. Let's throw some money at this situation and get some great intelligence and then not make that mistake over and over again.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think the expectation piece is so critical. And it's something I talk about a lot personally when I work with founders and so forth. When I hear them say, hey, we want to hire more people, especially if they got a funding round or something, and typically how that goes, right? It becomes a hiring spree of some sorts. The first thing I usually like to tell, founders and any hiring manager is that define exactly what you're looking for. To your point, the expectation. What are you really expecting realistically? And is your expectation actually doable or realistic to begin with? And a lot of times these conversations, in the beginning, I used to be really surprised that the more you dug deep into the expectations and the job profile and the characteristics of the individual that they want to hire, and you talk to more people in the organization, you start to hear different stories. And then what you're looking for changes a little bit before the hiring starts. And companies that don't do this, a lot of times, they actually go through this process actively during the hiring. And I'm sure you've seen this before as you're recruiting for, with a customer or, a company where midway through the process, the requirements for the role just shift drastically. You're like, hey, what happened, right? What happened here? So, and a lot of it, to your point, is what you mentioned, is that they never spent enough time in deep diving into exactly, hey, what are we looking for? What are the expectations? And what does success look like for us? And then let's go look for someone. So yeah, I think that's on point.
In startup culture, the same thing that makes us great as startup people makes us not so great, because we want to do, we don't want to plan. And it tends to be more reactive. Yeah. And goodness knows in the last cycle, the unicorn era with venture money flying around, you get your 10 or $20 million and you go on a shopping spree. And so just looking at if this is a good idea today, it's a good idea tomorrow. That's something that I started adopting when things started moving so quickly. And then you get this false sense of urgency. Like, look, if that person says I have 3 other offers and you have to give me an offer today or I'm going to leave. Well, guess what? That person's going to come into your organization and have the same attitude 3 months later. So be careful.
Yeah. And I use that same term, false sense of urgency, so much in those situations. Like, yeah, and to your point, it's so synonymous with founders. They're always in go, go, go mode. And it's like, hey, guys, take a step back, think this through. If a hire is made 1 week from today, as opposed to right now, the sky isn't going to fall. And that false sense of urgency, what I've seen also personally is that a lot of times it's actually led to premature hiring, an additional volume of hiring that you never needed as well. And, typically you're kind of, waving at layoff territory as you keep doing that over time. So yeah, there's a lot of problems that could come from that, but that could completely align with you there. Annemarie, you mentioned AI a few times during our conversation, and it is
great. Every time you hear AI, we're all going to be drunk in 5 minutes.
I know, huh? I mean, AI, I think for the past couple of years, not a day goes by we don't hear about it, and especially in our space, and you hear about it in very different ways and different forms and use cases. How have you seen AI change the recruitment landscape in these past few years?
Wow, I have some well-informed, strong opinions on the topic. But let me give you a brief backdrop, and then that informs the final answer. Yeah. So I launched the first recruiting firm in Los Angeles to focus on .coms when that was just a brand new thing in the area. And so a lot of us OG crew look at this current phase of AI in a very similar light. So what does that mean in plainer English? First of all, this technology has been around for a really, really long time. So for everyone going, wow, this is new and accelerating, it's not new, but I'm always fascinated by these culture shifts when something mainstreams. When your grandma got an iPhone, now there's a mainstream of mobile technology. And The dot-com boom was frothy from a business perspective, just like nobody's going to call themselves an AI company in a few years. Nobody says they're a .com company, but it's baked in. So informing where we are right now, we have not fully shifted in our culture of being very software as a service and tools driven. And, I Excel launched when I was a teenager and I worked in the finance department. So I've had an entire adult life of being told by software companies, this is going to give you all of this time back and then you're going to get to do other things. Well, expectations again. The expectations keep raising. So we're still at this point that's quickly shifting that all of these AI tools slapping on top of software, telling the recruiting industry, this is going to make it better and save you time. This to me feels like we have a garage full of stuff and the industry says, we're going to help you organize and clean out your garage. But first you got to shove all this other stuff in your garage and that's going to make it better. That is not how you clean a garage. And so we're quickly getting to the point. Here's the opportunity with AI. And I apologize for the longer answer, but it's really, really important that there's a lot of fear mongering around AI. There has been a lot of early and enthusiastic adoption in the recruiting and HR profession because this function has gotten so burdened by things that we could never keep up with in our human brains and getting applied for it because I think most recruiters and HR people are actually in this because we love people and we really want to help. And so being in this impossible situation that we can't scale because our brains can't keep up with all this technology, the opportunity with AI is to actually continue to evolve and be more systemic and not just solve little problems, but solve the bigger issues so that with our authentically human brains, we can get back to why we wanted to do this in the first place. Connecting with people, the nuance, the story, the feelings, the empathy, the experience, that is what makes a great hire. And that is what makes a great person. And that is why people like us wanted to do this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I completely agree with everything you're saying. There's a lot of chatter around AI, some of it good, some of it bad. But to your point, there's a lot of fear mongering about it. And especially when it comes to the interview space, and there's a lot of tools out there today that, do automated screen. I mean, to your point, automated screening has been around for ages. It isn't something new. I mean, when I started recruiting 15 years ago, it was there. Like, there were tools that did automated screening. There was video sentiment analysis like HireVue and these other tools. They're not new, right? These things were happening way before, but again, AI has gone mainstream, and it's so accessible and easy to actually implement, where it's become so easy to do, and you can just deploy it today and start using it. But I've been through, I would say, over the past month or so, several conversations with different HR professionals and colleagues across different forums and so forth. And there's been a lot of confusion around, hey, candidates today are using AI to really bulk up their resume, their cover letters, how they show up, all that kind of stuff. Do you see that
lie a lot more easily?
What's that?
I said you can lie a lot more easily. No,
well, yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, I think it's a fair expectation that there's always the best version of self that's going to show up in any job application or resume or so forth, right? But today, there's the people I've been speaking to a lot, and a lot of them HR professionals and some of them founders and others, is that they are concerned that during the hiring process, they can't as easily identify people who don't have certain skills, like, for example, writing or analytical thinking and so forth. Like, if you give someone a take-home test to do something, you can probably be sure they're going to be using some AI assistants and so forth. Have you seen any pushback or any concerns from, people who are hiring about this specifically? And what is your take, generally speaking, on this topic in general? And do you see this as a problem moving forward and something that companies need to hedge for?
Yes, it's a serious problem for companies, particularly that are working in a global and remote environment. I've heard all sorts of stories that somebody can, fake their identity and do all these kind of things. So yes, cybersecurity, identity verification, and AI, these are huge topics that a lot of money is getting thrown at. This again is where we're going to continue to be in this painful transitional phase. But the reason why I, as CEO of DreamMore, and others like me, are out there vocalizing, look, we need to get back to being authentically human. We need to lean into what our brains were formed for and what our purpose is as human beings. Because if I'm having an authentic conversation with you and I'm looking at things that AI is literally, not formed for, what have you learned? What have you experienced? Let me look at examples where you're applying some critical thinking. Tell me stories that ChatGPT is going to write a story, but it's not going to write your story. So a lot of us can very quickly glance at these tools and structures and go, yeah, that's not what I'm hiring for. Definitely the engineering function. I mean, let's be honest. There's a lot of software engineering that does not have to be coded by engineers like the old days. And this is another part of this big cataclysm. What happens to a lot of these white collar workers that have been in a career that paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now that's a job that AI can do? So I gave you a long, this is how complex the answer is nobody has it fully figured out. But I'm saying anybody on any side of this transaction, if you run away from the fear and just lean into, I'm a good writer and nobody could tell my story about my home's burned twice in a fire and I'm stronger for it.
Yeah.
So that's not a threat for ChatGPT to try that story. It's gonna fail at it.
No, agreed. I also have a take on this. So I think it's two-pronged. One of them you sort of alluded to right now with like having people focus and do what they do best. And even today, just like the example you gave, I think is amazing. Like, yeah, ChatGPT, Claude, and these other tools, they can write pretty well if you give them the right context, the right information. Can they write as good as a professional writer? No, they can't. Will they at some point? Who knows? But like even today, if you're looking for that superstar writer or coder or so forth, you're still going to have to go to that person to get it done. AI is not going to do the whole thing for you. Hey, it might. I was having, on my previous interview, I was joking with a guest, Vanessa, like, hey, let's talk in 5 years and see if we look like fools with what we were saying about this. But exactly, huh? But the other take also when it comes to the hiring perspective is my take on this is that if as a company, AI is fooling you into hiring the wrong people, your hiring process is no bueno, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty poor because no matter how you think of it, AI is going to probably get more people in the door for the initial stages, for like, hey, initial interviews, screening, and so forth. But after that, if you can't pick up on, hey, who's actually trying to throw, smoke and mirrors at you versus people who are the real deal, then it's how you do hiring, which needs to change. It's not that they're using AI tools. They can use AI tools or not. You're still going to hire the wrong people.
It's all of that. I mean, we see this in school systems, right? Like, you can't use, ChatGPT to write your thesis paper. Well, let's look back in history because it's always useful to follow economics professors and look at historians. And the past consistently predicts the future. So I'm older than some people, and I remember you weren't supposed to use your Texas Instruments calculator in school on your mock test. And nobody cares about that stuff anymore because what makes us human, I'm belaboring this, not only because this is so much the purpose and vision of DreamMore and the grander scheme, but it is very, very relevant in recruiting and human resources. No matter what your task assignments are, you have communication, you have relationships. Let's be honest, you're going to get a bigger raise if your boss likes you. So that is about communication and relationships. And you can call it sucking up, but that's just how things are.
Reality.
And
it's reality.
Between corporate America and startups.
Yeah.
If we back to what really matters, and we've been so isolated in this remote world we've been in that I've had many, many conversations with people recognizing, wow, I've let my relationships fall apart. And now that's what I'm working on. Well, good for you, because those of us in the recruiting profession have always known that our trusted relationships are the lifeblood of our career. And if everybody else starts to remember that and acts on it, we're gonna elevate this function again. We're gonna make better companies.
No, I agree. And to your comment about the Texas Instruments calculator, I have a similar one on my desk right now. I still use it. Annemarie, I use these every day. Like I cannot compute basic multiplication in my head anymore. I got to use this stuff. But to your point,
no, well, I mean, deep fakes are so good. I'm not sure that's really a calculator.
Right? It is. I swear to God, there it is. The cover and everything.
Okay.
The whole works. The whole. This has been around for like 20 years. Now that I think of it, I've had it for that long. It's crazy. So it brought back some memories now from my high school days. But
and I guess that's the reality, since I was sort of dissing AI tools earlier. But tools, a good tool is, we still use forks and chopsticks, right? So I'm not universally disparaging AI tools. I'm just saying that many of them are Band-Aids on, a broken instrument, and we need to go through this painful process of transformation and lean into it, because that's the only way that we're going to get through this without just being sad and going nuts.
Yeah, I mean, like I've had a very positive outlook on AI in general, and I've always thought of it, and I still think of it. It is an enabler. It'll actually help you do your work better, more productively, and so you can stop focusing on the stuff that a machine does better than you do, and focus more on the stuff that you do better than a machine. Right? That's the end game.
It's not your purpose in life to clear your inbox. It is not your purpose in life to go into Greenhouse or Taleo and click all those check marks and then feel like you can have coffee now. That's not what we were formed for.
Exactly.
And if the machine can do this, then, good on them. They're better at it than we are.
Exactly. And we can do much better things that are more valuable. And especially in startup land, I mean, the human brain power is unmatched in terms of, the ideas it generates, the value it can create. So I'm with you on that one. So Annemarie, to close things out here, what's some final advice you would give to startup founders who are just beginning to build their teams? A lot of the audience that, for this podcast and, organized chaos in general a lot of them are first-time founders, and there's a good chunk of people who are HR professionals, but there's also a group of people who are actually interested in diving into entrepreneurship, but they've never done it before. And they don't know where to start. But a lot of times I hear people tell me, hey, we want to build a strong team because we know people are going to make the difference, but we don't know what to do, how to do it. So what kind of advice do you have for people like that, who want to make good hiring decisions and build the right team?
I'll pick a few. I was at a women's event last night and a first-time founder was asking similarly. First of all, it starts here in your heart with your core. And because a founder personality is so much outward energy and grind culture and all these things we've been told are appropriate, it's like a Thich Nhat Hanh quote, and I'm going to garble it, but, I meditate every day for 5 minutes, but when I'm really busy, I meditate for 20 minutes. And as a serial founder who has built literally thousands of startups, I'm telling you, you can't do those important strategic human brain things when you're ground out and exhausted. So whenever you're feeling this overwhelm and your brain is spinning, have a glass of water and just sit still for a minute. It makes so much of a difference, and you don't know till you try. Fear. You're going to go out into the world thinking that everybody knows things and you're scared. And here's the reality. All of us are scared. None of us knows things. And when you accept that reality and just relax into it, which is usually the breakthrough that you get when you sit still and drink your water and meditate, that will create a much better outcome. And it's going to make you a better manager of people. It is going to attract better people because they're going to see this energy in you of acceptance and peace. And I know it sounds backwards, but I'm telling you, I could give you a checklist of all these tasks and knowledge to be gained, and here, go read some books. And yeah, that too, sure. But if there was any one thing, remember to take care of yourself, and everything that mirrors out from that is going to be powerful.
No, thank you. I think that's really great. There's two things, actually, all of what you said really resonates with me, but there's two specifically which I think are super, super important. One is what you exude towards others is going to attract, the kind of people that you would probably want to be working with, right? I think that's such an afterthought in a lot of cases where, especially founders are very technical. And, there's a lot of founders, especially in the SaaS world and, tech world and fintech world, that we work in, is a lot of them are very, process oriented, product oriented. They don't really take the time to think of this stuff a lot. But yeah, I mean, if you want to get the right people in the door, you need to show them exactly who you are, how you operate, how you get things done around here. It's not just it's not, a checkbox of items and just making sure that someone meets the criteria and they can get the job done as, alone, which I think is super important. The second one, which I think is great, is the whole fear thing. I mean, that resonates so much because I don't think I've ever met a founder that knows it all. None of us know it all, but I think there's always a sentiment. There's always this expectation that as the head of the organization, you have all the answers. And as I started working,
people think that about me, and I'm like, I'm just
right. Right. I mean, I say this. I mean, I've worked with hundreds of companies, in consulting and so forth, and also founded some startups. But I get a lot of people in a similar situation. They come to me asking for advice, and sometimes there are some questions that I'm like, I don't have the answer to that, because I don't know what to do in this situation. I've never even seen it before, and they're like, that's interesting. Like, yeah, I mean, even the CEOs of the most successful companies, they don't have all the answers. And especially first-time founders, I think there's this unfounded expectation that I should have all the answers all the time. And I need to be the one who should be the person who makes all the decisions that, in isolation of everyone else. No, I mean, the best founders that I've seen who have succeeded are the ones who had the best team around them and people who actually complemented their areas of expertise, as opposed to trying to hire people who only know what to do, what they know how to do as well. So I think those are some great points for sure.
Absolutely. I've learned this from therapists, educators, and investors, because you don't want to give the reveal that you don't know something. So you don't want to ask the question. Here's the reality. Look at it the other way. What if today was opposite day? And when you ask a question, that is a sign of intelligence because you're smart enough to ask a question.
Yeah.
And you even know the question to ask. And so if any founder spent the day, and not just with ChatGPT, by the way, you can ask a question, but ask more questions and ask ChatGPT to ask you questions back. But across the board, I love it when people ask me something because it shows they want to learn. It shows they probably already have some sense of the answer. And then it gives me the opportunity to give something. And then I feel good about that gift.
No, I think that's a great takeaway for sure. So Annemarie, to wrap things up, this was really a great episode, but any listener who wants to reach out to you, connect with you, have a chat, work with you, what's the best way to reach you?
So I'm really easy to find if you Google my name, but I'll be a little more specific. Annemarie Penny. I am on LinkedIn, and the LinkedIn handle is just /Annemarie because I've been on LinkedIn that long.
And it'll be
Dreammore. What's that?
It'll be in the show notes as well.
Be in the shout notes. Dreammore.io is our website, and Dreammore only has one M in it because amore is the Easter egg that's buried, and love is at the heart of what we do. Annemariepenny.com is my keynote speaker and panel moderator site, so you can go there as well. And I actually freely give my text number to people that are trustworthy. So if you message me on LinkedIn, chances are we can connect that way too.
That's great. Thank you for sharing all that. I'm sure listeners appreciate all these different ways they could reach out to you. So definitely anyone who wants to reach out to Annemarie, I highly recommend it. And I've also referred people to Annemarie before, and they've had a lot of, positive experiences with her as well. So I think I really recommend that to anyone who's interested. Annemarie, this has been great. And I think we should probably have a conversation a few years from now just to see how this whole AI stuff panned out, because it's one of those things that I'm super excited to see how it plays out. And if we actually going to look like the wise people that I hope we are versus the people like, hey, what were we talking about? Right. But
we are going to look exactly the same as we do in this moment right now. And the AI is going to be a little bit smarter. That's my vision.
Yeah, I think that's a good vision to have for sure. Well, Annemarie, this was great. Thank you again for joining the show. And we look forward to having you again at some point.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.